Okay, let's bring this meeting in order. Welcome everyone to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for January the 9th. We have a few consent items. Out of the consent items, we have a delegation that wants to do a quick presentation. Can I have Doug Good to the podium, please? Now, this is on number 4, traffic calming follow-up review for Glasgow Street. Afterwards, let's take the delegation first for number 4. Mr. Good, pursuant to Council policy and procedure, delegations have 5 minutes to make their presentation, and then if there's any questions from the committee, they will ask you afterwards. So Stay around after to see if there's any questions. So you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council. My name is Doug Good, and I have lived at 795 Glasgow Street for over 30 years. I am here this afternoon to represent the residents of Glasgow Street who live on the hill between Westwood Drive and Nell. We are the homes from number 715 to number 795, 17 in all. Because of our close proximity, we are the residents who witness the problems and are most affected by the traffic calming measures, as most of them are directly in front of our homes. When first proposed, we felt the traffic calming was a good idea. However, since the implementation, we have seen firsthand the issues with the installation, in particular between Westwood and Nell, where the chicanes are located. We understand that the city has done a follow-up survey and 127 homes were surveyed, with only a 47% response. These homes are on Glasgow Street between Fisher-Hallman all the way down to Westmount, I believe. However, the traffic calming chicanes are only located on the hill between Westwood and Nell, but the majority of the homes the city surveyed are far from the signage and chicanes and therefore do not witness the problems and are not negatively affected. I have spoken with 100% of the residents on the hill where the chicanes are located, except for one home that is unoccupied. All but one has signed a petition unanimously supporting the removal of the installations on the hill between Westwood and Nell. This is a 100% response, and we would ask that our view be considered over the many you surveyed who are far away from and are therefore not directly impacted by the installation. Here are the reasons we are requesting that the current traffic calming measures on the hill be removed. 1. We see firsthand that it has created a much more dangerous environment for pedestrians and cyclists. Several people commented that because of the chicanes, unsuspecting drivers have to swerve toward the bike lanes and sidewalk to avoid the curbing in the center of the road. 2. Your review indicates that there are now fewer collisions. However, this only takes into account the reported collisions. Very frequently, almost weekly, several have said, there are signs hit or bent over, as well as miscellaneous car parts, e.g. mirrors, glass, trim, and bumper pieces left lying around. These are collisions as well, but unreported, and if taken into account, as they should be, the collision rate since the measures were installed would be far higher than before. 3. Even though the speeds may be slightly reduced, it is still more dangerous, as cars have to maneuver through the chicanes. The bent signs and broken car parts are evidence of this. 4. Also, because of the chicanes, several residents say that they now feel unsafe working near the end of their own driveways while clearing snow and leaves. 5. The chicanes and signage also make it impossible to clear snow from portions of the bike lane, forcing bikes to merge with traffic at the same place the car lanes get narrower. This is yet another accident waiting to happen. Last of all, Glasgow used to be a beautiful street with its towering maple trees and elegant stone walls. We all agree that it is now marred with multiple unsightly, highly reflective signs, 26 of them in all on the hill alone, and concrete curbing which blinds the eye from the beauty of the street. We, the residents of Glasgow Street between Westwood and Nell, are trying to communicate to Council that because of our proximity, we see what others do not. If all but one resident who lives in front of the installation is willing to sign a petition, there is most definitely a problem which cannot be ignored. We firmly believe that it is only a matter of time until one of these collisions involves a cyclist or a pedestrian. We respectfully request your full consideration of our petition and experience and recommendation regarding the removal of the current traffic calming on Glasgow Street between Westwood and Nell. In addition, 5 residents have also sent emails to me with their own views and experiences which support the petition, and they have asked that I submit them to you. As a footnote, a number of residents I spoke with suggested that speed bumps would be a great alternative to reduce the speeds, yet not create the swerving, merging, accidents, excess signage, and confusion which is now present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Good. And as you've said, you've included a petition from the area residents, and then there's there's a list of emails that you've compiled as well. So
Correct.
I will circulate that with the committee members, and they can review that.
Thank you.
You have a question from Councillor Janetsky. Go ahead.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Good, and your presentation. I have a few questions. Maybe you can help out the council here. On that petition, how many signatures were there from property owners?
15.
15, okay. You indicated that the chicanes have been an issue and that you would like to have them removed, and that your solution was speed humps or speed bumps. Sometimes you refer to them, but we refer to them as speed humps. If you want to replace them, how many humps do you think would be in order?
I would say 2 or 3 on that section of road from the crest of the hill to the bottom of the hill.
Right. Okay.
I don't think it takes a lot. I mean, somebody in traffic would know how many and what size.
And that's something that could be worked out with staff, but just trying to get a ballpark from you. What about bike lanes? Has been an issue there as well with the chicanes, because they sort of tie in with them because you've got to sort of zigzag as you're coming up the hill or going down the hill. Yeah,
as I mentioned in here, especially in the winter, it's a problem with the bike lanes because they actually converge at one point, and because the snow can't be cleared at all out of the bike lanes as a result of the signage from the chicanes, the snowbank comes out right to the edge of the road. So the cyclist literally has to, like going down the hill, they have to go around the snowbank as the car comes in around the chicane. So it is a terrible situation, and I don't think, unless somebody goes out there and watches what happens for a while, you can't really understand it. But it's not right.
Kind of dangerous.
It's very dangerous, yes.
Okay. Now, for this meeting this afternoon, did you get a copy of the staff report with the recommendations?
I did not get a chance to read it. I tried to open it, and I'm sorry it would.
Okay, but you had nothing mailed to you.
No.
Did you have a covering letter saying that this report is coming to this council?
We had a report that said a few basic things. How many people they surveyed, like it was 140 something, and the results of the survey, it was like 3 lines.
So you got a letter inviting you to this meeting?
Yes.
Okay, but you didn't get no attached staff report?
No.
Okay, but so you were referred to look at it online, I guess?
I did not look at it.
Okay,
no,
that's fine. So if you didn't get the report, I guess, did any of your neighbors get a report, those on the petition?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
It was very difficult to get a hold of people in the short amount of time, and over Christmas and then the holidays.
Right. Since you're opposed to it, and I know that has been an issue when we initially were planning those chicanes back a couple of years ago when it was all part of that traffic calming. The intent then was to slow down the traffic on going down the hill. That was an issue, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I think a lot of the residents or the property owners in the area basically agreed that, well, let's just find some type of solution, and okay, we'll see how the chicanes work.
Right.
And now we know how they work.
Well, yeah. They don't slow traffic much, and they do create havoc.
Right. So do you feel that based on what you've experienced, and you and your neighbors, that maybe we should defer this item and have a a public meeting with the residents, more specifically the ones that are on the hill, the 15 or
The ones
17,
that have it in front of them. I mean,
and discuss this a little further as opposed to just approve it, because they're the ones that are mostly concerned, even though the survey had 127. Now, that's the whole stretch probably going all the way to Westmount Road.
right,
And those from Nell to Westmount don't have any chicanes, do they?
no.
No, so they're really not affected unless they drive up in front
Yeah,
of your
so
house.
why not? Well, they don't really know what they're voting.
Yeah. Well, you can see that less than 50% voted. So I have some questions for staff on that, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah. Mr. Good, have you noticed some slowing down of traffic?
Very slight. Some go slower, but some honestly seem to enjoy taking these chicanes at speed. So there are some very fast cars that still go down the street. And the speed and the maneuvering is what really makes this dangerous.
But according to our staff, the count showed at least a 10-kilometer reduction.
Yes, but they're only using a certain percentile too. They don't take the extremes.
Well, no,
The
but that,
extremes are the
can't do
problem.
that. We can't do that for many streets. When you're talking about it's difficult for some of the residents to maintain their properties adjacent to the chicanes. The chicanes are in the middle of the road, so I'm not sure what you mean by.
I said that the residents feel unsafe at the end of their driveways and walking the streets beside the chicanes because the cars come and they maneuver towards the chicane. And it's not like a car going straight down the road. When a car turns towards the sidewalk or turns towards where a person is standing, it makes a person feel uncomfortable. You stand there and have a car swerve towards you and see how you feel. And that's how we feel on the street when we walk the sidewalks and work at the end of our streets.
So looking at the picture on the picture that shows where the bike lanes are you saying that, and there's a sidewalk and then a bike lane, and on the opposite side there's just a bike lane? You're saying that the residents who are walking on the sidewalk where there's a sidewalk, a bike lane, and then the road feel unsafe?
Yes.
Okay. I have some questions for staff as well.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I just want to confirm with you that did you say that you don't mind the traffic calming, you just don't like this method?
Correct. Correct.
Is that a sentiment that you know of is shared by the people on your hill?
Absolutely. Yes. Nobody likes the speed, but have a big problem with these chicanes and how they're set up and how they work.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Janeski, do you have questions of staff or? Okay, so if anyone else had questions of staff, if you can please ring in. Thank you, Mr. Good, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Janeski? Yeah.
Went to staff?
Yeah.
Okay. Question to staff.
I'm
I guess,
sorry, just one
Mr.
second.
Ken Carmichael
No,
is
sorry,
here.
Mr. Janeski, just wait one second. Sorry, Councillor. I thought you said just Mr. Good was. Okay, then I misunderstood. Andrew Greaves?
Oh, there's another
My
delegation?
apologies. When we spoke, I thought you had said just one. Okay.
So you're dealing with him first, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Andrew, and again, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Go ahead.
Wait for us to say
It's
5.
Andrew
Is that what you're
Green.
saying?
I'm going to reset the clock for you. You got 5 minutes now.
Okay, thank you. So I am actually Doug's neighbor, although we didn't actually coordinate until recently that we're both coming here at the same time. I've actually only lived on Glasgow for 3 years, and so kind of the road was under construction when I moved in, and these measures were put in, and I'd kind of seen the before, but I've mostly seen the after. So I just wanted to come and share with you because although I do drive in a car on evenings and weekends with my family, when I go to work, I bike to work. And I take much pleasure in this. And so it's kind of, we've added these safety measures for road users. And so I thought I'd share the cyclist perspective of how these came. So when they were first introduced, I was actually quite excited. You know, this is kind of creative, and it's great to experiment. But kind of as time went on, I came to see some of the things that Doug mentioned where kind of things weren't quite working out as probably they were originally intended. So the first thing I noticed is let's just say the medians in the middle of the road. They do kind of force cars to pass the bikes more closely. So usually when I'm biking, actually, I try to avoid peak hours, and so there's generally not a problem with cars that could just give me lots of room to pass, but since the medians were put in now, even when there's not oncoming cars, the cars are passing me kind of more closely. So it just gives me a little bit less comfort on the bicycle. And then it is, the swerving, as was mentioned, is kind of quite awkward. So the raised part I was really excited about because this gives you some separation from the vehicles on the road. But then the raised part disappears as the median starts. So just as the road narrows, that's when you lose that kind of separated part of the bike lane. So that's always kind of been confusing to me as to why that was done that way. I'll say going down the hill, I don't know if anyone's actually ridden this road on a bicycle, but so that there's a raised bike lane, and then it disappears where the median comes in, and then it appears again. So these raised bike lanes have a little bit of a diagonal bump on them, and so with the speed you get going down the hill, plus the bump, the reality is I myself never take it because I don't want to hit a bump at that speed going down the hill, and I've only ever seen one person on a bike ever take that second separated part. So maybe it's just not even being used as intended. Okay, so the biggest issue is actually, as it turns out, I discovered the following season, the following spring after they were put in, and that is mainly because of the signage. The raised sections of the bicycle lanes don't actually get maintained at all, so the street cleaners miss them. So in the spring, it was quite noticeable. Last year there was a bunch of glass on many sections of the bike lane, and usually rain helps with this, and the street cleaners certainly clean up the glass quite well. But eventually most of the glass got cleaned up, but the glass on the raised sections didn't get cleaned up. And so that was kind of quite unfortunate, because on a bike, on the opposite side from the sidewalk, if you get a flat tire, then you have this bike that you have to haul across the street to the sidewalk. I have gotten flat tires on the street. I can't say that I've had one specifically from the glass, because I try to avoid it anyway, but it is notable to me. And then certainly riding in the winter, there's absolutely no snow removal on these raised sections. So although at first it seems like the raised sections are there to protect cyclists and separate them, but then in the winter, kind of when the craziness is at its peak, you can't actually even use them and you're forced onto the street. So that's also pretty unfortunate. So I'll just point out that, like, of those kind of 5 different things I had jotted down, none of them were actually problems to me when I first moved in. They all kind of were problems that arise from these measures. And yeah, it did bother me about the survey that was sent to us. It said you can respond via email or through the mail, so I emailed in, I responded, and then I got the results back. The survey did not break down for the road users how anyone used the road. So I mean, it could actually be that everyone who's used the road on a bicycle said they didn't like it, but the report didn't ask that question. So I think it would be good to do a report where it asks how do you use the road for road things that affect both cyclists and cars. Yeah, I guess that's all I really wanted to say. I had some ideas for changing things, but I think any change is probably left to someone more experienced or knowledgeable than myself. Thanks.
Okay, Andrew, there's a few questions. Councillor Fernandez, question of the delegation? Sorry, no. No? Okay, all right. Councillor Janeski?
Yeah, thank you for coming in, Andy, and providing your explanation as a biker, which is nice. Now, do you bike all year round?
Yep.
Okay. Now, do you find it, I guess, easier biking during the summer, well, in spring and fall, but the winter's the challenge?
Yeah, I like to say the winter's more of an adventure. But certainly, difficulty level goes up in the winter.
Okay. Do you find that the chicanes where we're located in this section on Glasgow, and the bike lane specifically, and then if you go along Glasgow past Nell towards Westmount, is that bike lane an issue, or is it fine to use?
So I've generally found all street bike lanes are generally no different from the ones on Glasgow, where there's no measures in place, where a lot of the time in the winter the bike lanes are not usable even when they are cleared, or at least not safely usable because of the amount of glass that builds up on them, ice that builds up on them. So they get cleared, but then some slush from the street from the cars gets pushed back into the bike lanes, and then things freeze. So on a streak of warm weather, like after we had the last melt, and then it kind of settled down for a bit, there's a good 16 inches of bike lane, I would say, that is usable, and it is actually much nicer than not having that 16 inches to ride in. But then if there's ever ice or big snows, then it's just the safest thing, at least I think, is to ride right where the cars ride, like in their tire tracks, where they've melted the snow away and cleared any debris away.
So based on what you've just said, you avoid the bike lanes because of the ice buildup from the melting and freezing, basically. So where do you bike? More on the sidewalks or more in the middle of the road, in the lane of where the cars go?
Definitely just on the road is, I think, the safer place. That's where I bike. I bike on the road when the bike lane is not usable. I will say where the actual measures are going up the hill, I did have an experience recently where I was pulling my son in the bicycle trailer, and then there's these unplowed bike lanes, so I had to go on the road. There's no choice. But the medians don't allow cars to pass, so there's often a line of cars behind me by the time I get to the top of the hill. It's not a huge hill, but it slows me down quite a bit to get to the top of the hill. So I don't know that it's unsafe for me to be having a line of cars behind me, but it does make me feel uncomfortable on a bike to be forced to do this, and I don't know of a safer way to do it other than to just make everyone wait for me to go up this hill.
So you said that you would like to have some solutions, but you didn't want to outline them. I'm giving you the opportunity right now. What do you think should be done as a solution?
So I think the idea of speed bumps would be fine. Any solution that gets full year maintenance, I think, would be acceptable.
So are you saying put in speed bumps, does that mean the chicanes will be removed? Is that what you see?
If I had a wish list, I'd say the most important thing is to have a separated bike lane the whole way that was maintained. That would be great, I think, but I don't think it's maybe not as realistic. Then so just having a not separated bike lane the whole way, not raised bike lane the whole way would be next up, so that it could be maintained.
So is the raised bike lane the issue as well?
To me, it's of all the things, it's the biggest issue. Yeah, because it doesn't get maintenance, and it forces you onto the road just as cars are forced towards you.
Right.
Or it comes in and out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great.
Good. Thank you, Andrew. That's everyone.
Great. Thanks.
So if you committee members want to ring back in to have questions of staff, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Singh. So question of staff, just can you tell us about why the raised sections of this bike lane are not being maintained in the winter or even in the spring?
Through the Chair, in response to that, new legislation has come down from the province for minimum maintenance standards, or just maintenance standards, and it is requirement of clearing lanes. So operations are doing a review right now. I don't know if you folks want to add further to this, but we are looking and working with operations on how we can better clear our bike lanes across the city.
So the intention is to improve the service in the near future? Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding, absolutely, yes.
Okay. And we heard from the delegations that, or the first delegation, that the chicanes seem to hinder snow removal, perhaps because of the signs. Can you comment on that, and is there a way we can improve on that situation?
Through the Chair, in response, there are a few locations. The delegates commented about how the bike lanes come on road and then go off road and then come back down on the road. And in an effort to identify that road narrowing, we have to have some marking signs in that area. Staff have recognized this challenge and will be investigating over the next few months to implement in the spring a revised control there that will still meet the mandate of getting a narrowed road but not interfering with the cyclists and snow removal as well. So that's a challenge in front of us. We think we have some ideas that may address that. Other things that have been identified has been the abrupt change from the on-road to the above-road, the raised aspect of the bike lane. And there's a concrete gutter in between those two connections. our intention is to work further on revising those to make that transition smoother, so that you don't get that bumping and that angling in that area, to hopefully. But again, if the bike lanes aren't being cleared in the winter, that's useless. But that's obviously a big aspect that we'll have to follow up on as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Janetsky.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Carmichael, when we were putting in these consideration of traffic calming back 3 years ago, roughly, we indicated that there would be some challenges. We sort of thought, but we said, let's just go ahead with it, because the real issue was the speed in the area, and we thought that the chicanes would be a solution, hopefully, to that. And I guess that they were, because when you look at the statistics, they sort of prove that. However, the other challenges have surfaced is the snow removal issue and the raised bike lanes in terms of the safety component, etc. The residents have indicated that, or the delegations have indicated that they would like to see the chicanes removed and replaced with speed humps. I'd like to get your comments and opinion on that.
Yes, thank you. In response through the chair, the request for speed humps, while a valid one and certainly would function in reducing speeds, is not an option in this case due to the fact that Glasgow Street is a primary emergency response route as well as a transit route. So through the review, we did explain that the vertical deflections were not an option for Glasgow Street due to the significant impact it would have on emergency service response. So in that regard, while it's recognized that speed humps are a very effective speed reduction measure, it would not be an option for this roadway due to the classification and the function that it provides.
And I appreciate your comments, and those comments from the emergency services, whether it's fire, bus service, ambulance, police, they don't like them, period, on any road. They would just like to have the straightaway. But we still do have them on roads because they have been approved by council. And I can appreciate those emergency services saying they don't want them, but we have traffic calming speed humps all over the city.
In response to that comment, we revised our policy in late 2013 based on concerns identified by both emergency services and transit, the impacts of the speed humps. So our policy going forward does not permit speed humps on, as mentioned, the emergency response routes nor transit routes. Where some speed humps have been installed before that policy was revised are few and far between, and mostly limited to local and minor collector roadways. Probably the example that doesn't fit that description would be Greenbrook Drive. If we were to do a review of Greenbrook Drive under current policy, speed humps would not be permitted on that roadway.
I'll let Mr. Reedman add something further.
Through the chair, I was going to highlight that Ken's point about council had specifically approved that not allowing speed humps on roads such as this as part of the policy refresh that we brought a couple years ago.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Meyer, on page 4-2 in your report, that was prepared by Stephen Ryder, I'm looking at the in the middle, the volume speeds. And can you help me out here? When you look at the October 16 date, and you add up the northbound and southbound figures, 2,800 and 2924, they add up to 5724. And then in May 16, again, northbound and southbound, the 2414 plus 2255 add up to 4669. Yet when you look at the two September 11 figures, 2280 and 2981, they don't add up to 2621. They add up to 2000. They don't add up to 5621. They add up to 5267. Much lower, about 350. So that would change the 1.8%, make that a little higher. And then I also noticed that the next figure for September 11th, or September 2011, Adding 2505 and 2768 actually adds up to 5273, which then would change the 12.8 and reduce it to whatever the new percentage would be. So those, it's a minor thing, but I think there shows some incorrect information on this. What I would recommend to, what I'm looking for basically as a result of this, and seeing that the delegation's request of the 15 to 17 property owners immediately affected on this, they're the ones that really don't want the traffic calming chicanes, and they want the speed humps. But then I understand where staff's coming on this, and we seem to have a dilemma here. So because of this dilemma, I'm requesting that this item, this report, be referred back to staff, and we have a public consultation meeting with those handful of residents, those property owners, to see whether we can come up with some compromise. Because when we dealt with this 3 years ago, we did deal with the residents in the area to come up with some type of solution, and the chicanes was the solution that was basically agreed upon. Now we have an issue, and I think we've got to go back to these residents and have that public meeting and sit down with them over the next couple of months and try to come to some type of solution. And so,
Are you making a comment, Councillor Snetsky? Are you making a comment?
I'm sorry?
Are you making a comment?
Well, I guess it's coming to a I have no further questions of Mr. Carmichael. Yeah, it sort of went into that.
If you want to continue, then your comment
Okay,
will
there's
be
nobody
done.
after me?
There's a few others, yeah.
Oh, well, okay, so my recommendation is basically to refer this, and I'll comment on it as well, to refer this to a future meeting and take it off the table today.
Okay. All right. So I'll take that as part of your comment. Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, just not too big of a question. Mr. Carmichael, you said that you will be reviewing the signage and the way the bike lanes transition onto the road. When in the spring will you be doing that? Do you have an idea?
Through the chair, that would be weather dependent, and we would act on that as soon as possible, for sure.
Okay, because I think
early in the
that
spring.
I mean, I'd be interested to know if the residents would see that as a positive change. The medians that are there's only 2 of them. Are they located in front of driveways, so people cannot turn right or left from their driveway?
Through the chair, in response, we intentionally designed the location of those so that they would not restrict access for the residents. There's obviously going to be impacts because there's added infrastructure in the roadway, but the access is still definitely available.
Okay. One of the comments on the emails was about the inability of parking for guests. Can you help me understand better what the driveways are like along this road? Do you have an idea?
Through the chair, I would suggest that the driveways are longer than typical homes on this roadway. The homes are typically set back significantly and have quite lengthy driveways. Some are longer than others. It depends on what area of the street.
Okay. But if we were to maintain the same status quo in terms of the parking, there would be some challenges if a household or resident had, a large party, say at Christmas time type of thing.
Through the chair, that was a challenge through the process, that due to the limitations of the road width and the requirement to implement bike lanes, we were limited in what space we could have to provide parking. We certainly tried to where we could, but it didn't end up being much provided.
Was the sidewalk always there?
On one side of Glasgow, in this section up the hill, yes. Actually, through the entire corridor, the east side or the south side of Glasgow Street's always had a sidewalk, yes.
Okay. The reason I ask that is I just want to make sure that I understand what the roadway width was, and if the sidewalk was there the whole time, the roadway has been diminished by the painting of the bike lanes.
The provision of the bike lanes certainly narrows the available space we have on the road, for sure, yes.
Okay.
You're adding 3 meters for 2 bike lanes.
So just to clarify, there some sections of the sidewalk was added as part of the reconstruction. So there were areas of Glasgow that missed sidewalks in the past.
But in this specific area between Nell and Westwood, the sidewalk was always there?
I believe the sidewalk was added as part of this reconstruction in that location.
Okay, I'm seeing yes and no's here. But I'll ask the councillor, he'll know. Just one last question. The roadway width here in the picture in the report. Mr. Carmichael, I'm going to lean on you because you have experience with Pioneer Drive and the medians that we put in there. Would this roadway width in that bottom picture be wider or narrower than that Pioneer Drive piece where we've put those large medians in?
You're referring to the latest Pioneer Drive in the one down by Bechtel by the community center, those?
Yes.
Yes. You're testing my memory.
Sorry. because I bike through there and we have sidewalks as well, so I just wanted to have an understanding if it was wider or the same width.
I'm confident to say that the distance between the median and the curb on Pioneer would be approximately 4.5 meters. And I would suggest it's approximately the same here, except you've got the bike lanes marked, which is the difference.
Okay.
We typically go on a minimum of 4.5 to address operations needs to plow.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis?
I'm sorry, Mr.
Okay, Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Singh. Just a question of staff. With the traffic calming here, is the median the main traffic calming factor by reducing the road width, or is it the visual of the signage on the medians, or perhaps a combination of both?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that question?
Sure.
Are you asking what gets better speed reduction?
Yeah. What would you see as the main traffic or speed reduction factor? Is it the narrowing of the road with the median, or is sometimes the visual of the signage that's on that cause people to slow down?
In response, excellent question. I would suggest it's both. Obviously, when we put an obstruction in the roadway that has a curb, we have to mark it for drivers to be able to identify it so they don't hit it. The sign markings to identify those medians provide a visual shrinking of the narrowing of the carriageway, which provides that shy factor, which does have a positive impact on reducing speeds. Just the narrowed road itself and the narrowed space that the vehicles have to go through also has a positive effect on reducing speeds.
Okay, because there was something, and I know you're aware of this. I saw it in Montreal over the summer where there was not a median in the road, but there was a bendable speed sign right in the middle of the road. And when you saw that, it may be because I was not used to it. I certainly slowed down, but I don't know if, after repeated passing of that, it would have any effect.
Through the chair, that's a very valid point. That's, in fact, we're familiar with the measures you're speaking of, and we're looking into that to be incorporated into our smaller scale traffic calming policy that we hope to present to council earlier this year. But there's no question, you put a sign in the middle of a roadway, that will have an impact on slowing vehicles down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Janeski, do you want to move this? Or you said you wanted to defer?
Yes. Yes, I'd like to move that this item be referred back, and so we can consult with the neighbors or immediate property owners in the area from Westwood to Nell, and have discussions with them to address the chicanes and why they don't want them, and staff's position as to the speed humps issue, and see what we can come up with in terms of a solution. Basically, the staff report, just but based on the survey, and the survey took a whole stretch of Westmount right from one end to the other, a whole stretch of Glasgow, I should say, from one end of Westmount right down to Westwood here. And, of course, the chicanes only affect the 20-some-odd property owners in this section and not the rest of of Glasgow. So I would recommend that we defer this for further discussions, or for further review with staff and the residents of some public meeting in the coming weeks, and we can work out the time and location with staff on that. And that'd be my recommendation, because when I look at the report and I look at the issues, we have some serious concerns. And as I mentioned initially, that we had sat down as part of the traffic calming back 3 years ago or so to try to slow down the traffic on Glasgow and this street because it is downhill. And in fact, on a couple of occasions, I went to the top of the hill and I traveled at 50 kilometers, and then I let my car slowly glide down the hill. And it just picks up speed. And you can't help it. It's just gravity pulls it, and you end up going almost 60, 70 when you get down to the bottom by now. And it's not that you push the gas pedal, it's just gravity takes it. So unfortunately, we do have a speeding issue here, and it has been addressed with these medians to some degree, but we still have issues of safety, we have still issues with snow removal, we have still issues with bike lanes and the safety of them, and I think this has to be discussed and addressed with them. So my recommendation is to refer this back to staff and have a public consultation with the residents.
Okay, all right, I'll take the referral. Before that, Mr. Carmichael, you had something to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could add, I just wanted to point out, when we do the survey and base our recommendations to council on these surveys, yes, we presented the information to you on the whole, but we do want to analyze it section by section, and I'd like to point out having a follow-up meeting might make a lot of sense, and this is not in any disrespect to the petition presented by the delegate and the validity of it, but the responses we got to our survey on the section up the hill from Nell to Westwood, we had 14 in favor of maintaining the measures and 10 opposed to maintaining the measures. So obviously that contradicts directly with the petition the delegate showed or presented to us today. To me, that reinforces let's re-engage the residents and come to a solution for everybody's satisfaction.
So, sorry, are you saying that you support the endeavor to have another meeting in the community?
If council feel that's the required way to proceed, I think there's some benefit in doing so due to the conflict between the information our delegate has received compared to what our staff survey received.
Okay, all right. There's a few other members of council. As to timing only, please. Okay. Councillor Davey?
Timing only? Okay, I had a question, but...
Okay, if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. Coming from that. So, Mr. Carmichael, I guess my concern, too, is if I understood the motion correctly, it was only to engage the people in that small section. Presumably, any changes there would affect everyone on the street that was interested in the first place. Do we run the risk of having a second backlash if we were to make... Presumably, they're going to want changes. Do we run the risk of having a second backlash?
Through the chair, you pose a valid point. It's not uncommon. Our experience has been typically the residents are more concerned and more engaged when the residents are in a specific area of their homes. They certainly want to provide comment on the remainder of the roadway, but typically don't get as passionate about that. I appreciate what you're saying. We had challenges through the review to come to the best solution on the hill here as well.
Right, and we can't get into the specifics now, but I mean, presumably if speed humps aren't permitted and the chicanes are, there's a desire to have them removed, if they are removed, there's no real traffic aside from there's going to be minimal traffic coming in the area.
In response, I would suggest that's probably the case. Obviously, when we went through the original review, we tried to explore a number of options because it was clearly identified to us by the residents in that area the speeds were concerned. And recognizing we couldn't use humps, we tried to put in what's best. So you make a valid point. If we were to remove these measures, I would suggest the speeds would go right back up to where they were, and obviously that might be a concern to the residents as well.
Okay, thank you. I will not be supporting the deferral.
Okay, all right. So the motion for the deferral is before us. All those in favor? The timing. Councillor Janetsky. Are you leaving it to staff, depending on...
The timing basically would amount to how quickly we could put something together with staff in a public meeting and maybe come back in a couple of months, roughly. I don't have a date. It's just a matter of working with staff, and we can bring it sooner. That'll be fine. But
are you able to outline a date, or would you just prefer that it be left to staff to determine suitable time?
What do you feel, Ken?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. In order to, if we were to engage with another public meeting, I would suggest a month at least to set it up because we have to give the residents notification in advance of it, crunch that data. If we were to come back to you in April or May, keeping in mind anything that we change based on any decision is not going to happen until our rehab contract's engaged at that time of year anyways. So I would suggest April or May we could get back to you.
So we can pick the last day of April back to council, or you're coming back to committee date, right?
We would, yes.
Yeah.
So we can do the 1st of May.
Okay. All right. We have the date and the motion and a recorded vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. All right, staff have their instructions. Thank you. Can I have a mover for the rest of the consent items? Moved by Councilor Fernandez. All those in favor? Opposed? Those items carry. On to item number 7. For the community engagement review, the recommendation is that the recommendation contained in the community engagement review as attached to the Chief Administrator's Office report be approved with any financial implications to be considered as part of future budget deliberations. There is a presentation from staff. Josh, 5 minutes? All right. Go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, members of council. Thanks for having me here today to talk about the community engagement review. This is a body of work I've been leading over the past year, and basically the focus of it comes from our recent business plan priorities, which is basically to look at community engagement practices across the corporation and just to get a better understanding of what's working well when we engage with citizens, what are some areas we need to potentially improve on, what are some other challenges and opportunities that we need to be considering. And the focus of the review is really around community engagement around municipal decision making. So when we come to these kind of settings and a report's brought forward, how did we engage with citizens in that process? The work involved in the review basically was broken down into 3 distinct phases. The first phase involved basically just trying to figure out what the purpose and objectives of the review were and what we were trying to accomplish. Early on in the process, if you recall, I did interview council members individually because I felt it was important to get your sense from community engagement and what you've been hearing from constituents before we proceeded with any additional engagement. And it was promising to see that a lot of the themes that council raised was reflected by other stakeholders later in the process. The second phase really involved identifying the issues and opportunities through a number of conversations that I had over the past year. So I talked to about 25 internal staff groups from transportation, planning, engineering, community services, pretty much the whole gambit to get a sense of how they approach community engagement. And I also had discussions with 11 advisory committees, and also we received about over 500 responses through an online survey on Engage Kitchener that we partnered with the neighborhood strategy on. The last phase of work involved basically taking all the information we heard and then kind of distilling it down a bit, trying to figure out what recommendations would work in our context. So we did that through 2 staff workshops where we had sort of collaborative discussion, and also 2 citizen workshops where citizens were invited to talk about some of these findings and you know, basically talk about next steps and recommendations. And I just want to emphasize that the contents of the review do come from a lot of these conversations. So it was basically me just relaying the information back to you from what I heard from our discussions, through the staff discussions, and also with citizens. Through the process, we basically learned that there are different factors that can affect engagement depending on the stage that we're in. So the recommendations in the review have been grouped into buckets. So we basically have it presented as before community engagement even starts, during community engagement, and after community engagement. So I'm just going to touch on a few of the recommendations within each of those buckets. Before community engagement, we have some recommendations around a corporate calendar of engagement activities and also an internal working group to discuss community engagement, and that really comes from the need to improve collaboration and coordination of our engagement activities and making sure that all the information and all our plans for the year are listed in one place, just so we can avoid scheduling conflicts and also just to reduce public fatigue of having survey after survey go out. We also talked about, there's some recommendations around community engagement plans. So before we even decide to go out, we probably need to sit down as staff and try and figure out what are our objectives, what are we trying to get out of this engagement exercise. And it's important that those plans are scalable depending on the type of project. It could look different. And then there's also some recommendations around a special outreach strategy. So that really stemmed from the pretty big theme that came around, we're not hearing from everybody. So how do we hear from more people? That's what this strategy is hoping to accomplish. And also a recommendation around staff training as well. So if the expectation is to do more and better community engagement, then we need to support staff through that process. The during community engagement bucket is really talking about things like a coordinated street team and event booth presence, because we heard a pretty resounding theme around going to where the people are. So is there a way that we can coordinate and centralize that work rather than having 10 different staff groups go out to one single event with clipboards and their own set of resources? Can we pull together and work together, also just to provide a more consistent experience for citizens who are going to these events? There's a couple recommendations here on neighborhood demographic profiles that we pulled from the neighborhood strategy draft, which is basically trying to better understand the community we are engaging with, because, you know, different tactics work different depending on the audience and the age and that kind of thing. And also a big theme that actually emerged through the council discussions were the statistically representative data piece. And so we have a recommendation around exploring that further and seeing what's possible with that piece, because as technology emerges and there's all these new platforms coming out, is there a way that we can move to a more representative analysis other than just every 4 years when we do the strategic plan? Is there other capacities that we could do for other projects? And then the after community engagement bucket talks about closing the feedback loop and reporting back. That was a pretty big theme, and often a place, I think, where citizens fall off the radar. Like they're contacted through the process, but then sometimes they don't always hear about the final outcomes. And evaluation, so this focus on continuous improvement. And before we jump to the next engagement exercise, we probably should sit down and really think about what worked well in that process, what could be improved for next time. And especially if we're trying new creative ways to engage with citizens, new pilots, new different ways of doing things, we really want to be sure that we're evaluating those things to see how they're working out. And then there's some general recommendations as well around a community engagement policy, a citizen's guide to community engagement, updating our existing community engagement toolkit from 2008, and also developing an implementation plan to pull all this work together so that we can see it be implemented over the next few years. I just wanted to close with a couple comments around roles and responsibilities. That's a big thing that I learned in this process, is that everyone's got a role to play when it does come to successful, positive engagement. So council has a role to play, staff has a role to play in this process, and also citizens, the people coming to the meetings or filling out the online survey. There's definitely not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to community engagement from what I've learned. We can try as much as we can to streamline and offer templates and resources, but we need to be mindful to approach each engagement with a unique lens and looking at sort of the context and the audience. And something promising for me that I heard from citizens was that when we do community engagement, it's one piece of the puzzle, right? There's obviously, as you know, in making decisions, there's other things to consider and think about. And so we need to balance those competing interests, and we need to look at the engagement we received when we do that. But what was promising to hear from citizens was that they recognized in the workshop that sometimes decisions are going to be made that they don't necessarily agree with. And so the focus for those people was they just want to understand how their input was used. They want to see that it was valued and considered. And they also want to just understand the rationale for the decision being made. So even if we can do that, even though we may not be able to please everyone all the time, I think that'll go a long way in sort of building trust and respect in the engagement process. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think that gives us all a very good overview. Councillor Fernandez. Go ahead.
Thanks. And I'd like to move the recommendation at the appropriate time.
Great.
So Josh, I like your document. It's very readable. There's a lot of words and a lot of writing in there, but when you're talking to people, people can tend to give you lots of ideas. I also like the fact that you included these pie graphs, which I think is really important, because sometimes when you add the numbers together, you can see that, well, maybe we aren't doing it so well, right? So when I have a ton of questions, so I'm going to take up my full 5 minutes, and I'll probably take up my next full 5 minutes. When you were talking to staff, what were some of the other challenges that you heard from staff? So you've identified a toolkit and you've identified some training, but there must be other issues and challenges you may have heard from staff when they're facilitating public meetings. And then conversely, what did you hear from the public?
So is your question around specifically public meetings?
Yeah.
As a topic?
Yes.
Sure, okay. So from what I heard from city staff, there's obviously different ways of hosting a public meeting. So I heard about those different options, right? Whether it's formal, presentation, or whether it's drop-in, or whether it's a mix of both. And I heard, obviously, some challenges around, sort of facilitating an effective meeting. Not all staff have that experience. And so when you have citizens coming together on sometimes contentious topics, it can get, a little bit unruly sometimes. And so having those facilitation skills are needed to really just effectively manage the public meeting. I did hear from citizens, actually, because I did specifically ask them a question on public meetings because I knew it was a priority of council. Is I asked, well, what's your preference for a public meeting? And it was across the board. Some people prefer the drop-in style because it's more fitting to their personality. They don't want to stand up in front of an audience of people and ask a question. Other people prefer the formal presentation because everyone's getting the same message at once. Other citizens commented around creative ways, like, going to the market or hosting a pop-up booth in a neighborhood. They like that kind of stuff too. So my recommendation and approach to this work is that let's be flexible in terms of how we do this, because I think it would be a mistake if we set some very clear, rigid guidelines when I've heard from people that it's kind of all over the place. But let's at least be more clear for staff and citizens how the meeting's going to run in advance, because sometimes I've heard that they show up expecting one thing and then they leave with a different expectation.
Right. Good. So asking the right question can be a real challenge, because depending on how that question is asked, gives you the depth or the breadth or the narrowness of the scope of the answer from staff to a public, to a resident. And it can sometimes leave them feeling very puzzled or frustrated because they don't feel like they got the right answer. Did you hear that as well?
I did definitely hear that, particularly from staff, that it can be tough when you have a survey and you're only asking 10 questions. What are we going to ask to make sure we get the information that we need? For myself, speaking from experience in developing lists of questions to ask in these interviews and doing the workshops, it took me months of preparation to really figure out what are the questions I need to ask, because I only have 2 hours with citizens. Mm-hmm. If I'm not asking the right questions, the whole exercise has its value limited in that sense. So I think for the training program and for the tools and templates that I'm hoping to develop, I would like to see a separate module on question development, because I think it warrants it for sure.
Okay, and that's perfect, because that leads into my next question. When you're talking about an engagement, a calendar of engagement, as well as an internal working group, are these realistic expectations? Are they a real possibility that we can do it? Or is this sort of saying, well, this is what we would like, as opposed to a wish, I wish we could do this. You're really seeing that, yes, staff supports it. The public, of course, would support a lot of this. Do you see that's a real possibility?
I do think it's possible. I think it will take some work for sure, and for a lot of commitment in terms of the people involved in that to keep up with it. But to give you an example, when we had the staff workshops in the learning room, I assigned seating. So we had staff that never met before from different areas of the city talking and networking. And I heard a lot of positive comments around, oh, that's what you guys do. That's really cool. Like, this is what we do. And so there was a lot of talking happening after the 2 sessions. And that's when I realized that there should be a focus on continuing that dialogue as we move forward in our work, right? I only did those 2 workshops as part of this process, but the working group is really intended to keep that notion alive. Like, let's just share the resources and the experience that we're all doing anyway, rather than working in silos. It's an attempt to try and bring those things together.
Right. And I think that that's when you talk about the responsibilities at the end of this document, it's really critical that you've identified we all have a responsibility, and the council especially. I really, really like that you did that. My time is up, so I'll let somebody ask questions, and I'll come back. Thanks.
Thank you. Please bring in Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Josh, thanks a lot for the excellent work on this. I was able to attend the public information events that you had and the workshops, and they were very well-rounded, and I learned quite a lot around the table as well. The differing platforms that people prefer to be engaged in, how can we bridge that and reach across all those differing platforms?
Are you talking like in person and also online?
Yeah, there's online, there's and some, again, like in person, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I personally think we should move to a model where we're offering as many options as possible, because that's what the review found as a finding, was that citizens want options. And actually, I think one of the results in here says something around 51% of people surveyed do feel the city does well in that. So we do offer options, and I think people recognize that, but we need to continue to do that, especially as we move to the direction of digital and online engagement and the Digital Kitchener direction, which I think is really exciting, and we've seen a lot of success with Engage Kitchener. We got 2,000 registered users in 1 year, which is double the goal that we set out for ourselves. So clearly, people want to use these tools, but you still need the in-person kind of conversations, the email, the phone call. And personally, I found through this process that my most valuable conversations were had in person.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez was talking about the right questions. You want statistically significant information, you have to ask the right questions. Are we looking into maybe getting some training on that, or...
Yeah, it's a pretty robust training program that we're hoping to develop with this work. We do have some introductory community engagement training that's been led by existing staff over the past couple of years. What I heard from staff was a request to do even more and more practical training. Like, we need help figuring this issue out. There was a lot of positive, reception from staff to do this work. They do recognize it's important. Community engagement is part of the work that we do, but we do need more specific, robust training. And so what that looks like is yet to be seen. We'll have to build that out, but I'm envisioning it as being, potentially, in-person training, but also just like modular training too. Like how to design an effective online survey. Here's a half-hour training session on how to do that, and all the information's laid out for you, rather than it being a full day session away from their desk kind of thing. Giving options, I guess.
Okay. And one last question. One of the things I heard around the table was the perception of a public meeting. Is it just an information meeting where we're telling you this is what we're going to do, or is this a meeting where we're thinking about doing something and actually asking for input? How can we change the perceptions out there so they know it's a very transparent and authentic meeting?
For sure. I think that really stems back to our community engagement framework. So we have the 4 levels of inform, consult, collaborate, and trust. And I think the issue that's happening and what causes that confusion is that sometimes we're hosting a public meeting just to inform, and people think we're collaborating, and vice versa, right? So we need to just be more clear up front which framework level we're talking about. And I think that also links to the Citizens Guide to Community Engagement. All this work, how can we transfer it in a way that actually citizens will understand? And also, if we do develop any videos or communications tools, being mindful that these are tools that are going to be used corporate-wide. So that's something that if I go to an engineering public meeting and I see the content, it should appear the same as if I go to a cycling meeting, right? They're going to maybe function differently, but the view of the materials and the information does need to be consistent.
Okay. Thanks, Josh.
Councillor Fernandez.
Okay.
Oh, actually, Councillor Marsh hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to let her speak. If you can just ring back in. Councillor Marsh.
Josh, great job on this. I really love the, I am a big proponent for community engagement and strong community engagement, and I think you know that already. but I'm really pleased to see this come forward. A couple questions I had. One was just around a lot of times when you're referring to community engagement in this document, it feels like you're talking about projects like engagement projects that we might, put on Engage Kitchener, for example, big ones. But when I think about community engagement, I think about those things, but I also think about things like, road reconstruction, public meetings, or even just Facebook posts, or when people call in to the city. And I'm just when I think about closing the feedback loop, I'm wondering if you've thought about that too, about how would we maybe find ways to close the feedback loop when somebody hasn't been engaged in one of those big public consultations, but just a smaller way. So, for example, somebody calls in, asks a question, or gives feedback about something. Does that individual then get tracked, and will there be a way to somehow get back to them and say, here's how we used your feedback, or are you thinking more just general?
I think it's probably twofold. So closing the feedback loop in terms of the recommendation and how it's worded is more on an annual basis, like a check-in. Here's what we did as a city when it comes to community engagement. Here's some stats. But then there's also that other side, which I think what you're talking about, that after every individual interaction, whether it's on a small project, a phone call, you could apply the concepts of closing the feedback loop on that too. And so whether it's returning the person's phone call, getting back to them, I think the way to effectively do that is to just keep track of all the incoming engagement that we are receiving, right? So whether it's comments through an online survey, or if we're getting phone calls, make sure we're jotting the number down, getting a name so that we can follow back. And also just to clarify on your comments around that this is maybe seems a bit project specific. As I said, this is really focused on decision-making community engagement. So I did approach that in all the discussions with the stakeholders, as I made that clear. I said, we're not talking about over-the-counter kind of engagement or pick up the phone call kind of engagement. That's totally important and totally valuable, but it was outside of the scope of this work. This was when we're working on a project, we have a public meeting, it's got to go back to council, decisions got to be made. How did we involve citizens through that whole process?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then for the branding of the 4 forms of community engagement, do you foresee the need to potentially use more than one to define a type, to define engagement? So, for example, that road reconstruction project meeting where, the first one where we have a concept, we're going to inform the residents. This is what we're going to do. And really, we're actually not going to totally change the design of the road. Mm-hmm. So we're not consulting them on big things, but we might be open to their feedback, consulting them about smaller aspects of the design. So would we then perhaps brand it as informing and consult together?
I think so, because in my experience in sort of working with the different staff groups, it seems like it's almost always a combination of something. Inform, consult, collaborate. Rarely do we get to entrust, but usually it is a combination of any one of these 4 potentially. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that we do have that crossover for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And one small piece of feedback, just I like that we're going to brand the 4 types of engagement with 4 different images. I'm just curious if you're completely settled on the 4 images or not.
Not really. Like, my intention was to update this in some capacity for this purpose, because we just did the review, so I wanted to kind of freshen it up a bit. So we did get some, like one of our designers to kind of help me with, kind of giving this a facelift a bit. Mm-hmm. But assuming we move forward with the Citizens Guide to Community Engagement, all of this stuff would then be reopened, because I think we would want to look at it as a full brand exercise.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Thanks.
Councillor Galway-Sealock.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for your work on this. I appreciate the document very much. I wanted to just touch base on regarding the neighborhood demographic profile, and I know that you said different people need different engagement, and so, you know, if you're doing, whether it be a Ward 5 issue or a citywide issue, will there be the opportunity to use different tools to get different demographics within the same engagement? So if we're doing a citywide, I just know Ward 5 is a very young demographic, and typically, and it shows in some of your results, that it's a hard time engaging those folks. So a different tool may be better to get them to a meeting, or not to a meeting, but get them to engage. Is that kind of where this is all coming down to in the purpose of the demographic profile?
For sure, and I think for a certain period of time, it is going to be trial and error, right? Like, we're going to have to try this in Ward 5, see if it flies, try the same thing in Ward 7, maybe it flies there, but not in Ward 5. So I think that is the intention, is to really just explore this further, and it matches well with the evaluation piece. So anything we do try, for example, in your ward, we will want to do some kind of report that says, did this actually work? And if so, then let's try it again and ask citizens, why do you like this better than how we've done it in the past?
Right. I know for the demographic that in the ward that I'm representing, even for something that is very important when it comes to traffic calming, we still don't get the numbers of people that you would anticipate at others. So maybe it's looking at doing something more online, and how do we engage them from that perspective. So I appreciate that we've taken that definitely into account. So thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Okay. So as I was going through the document, there were a couple of things that stood out to me. One I just have to ask about, Josh, is on page 19, halfway down, you've got, what we've heard. One of the comments you have here, collecting statistically representative data is the process of choosing a representative sample from a target population. Just wondering if that is more of a definition as opposed to what we heard.
Right,
okay.
That's fair.
Okay, that was just, the teacher in me. On page 21, you identified what we heard, and I think this is really where the improvement has to happen, and that's evaluating the engagement and the outcomes, closing that loop. Do you see that as because if we've done most of the other things right, this is the part that I've heard over and over and over again is, well, what happened? Well, what's going to happen? I mean, you took all this from me, but now where are we going to go with this? Do you see that as a sort of the significant piece that has yet to happen?
I think it's one of them for sure, and I think that we could potentially lead a really exceptional engagement activity or exercise for an initiative, and if you fail to close the feedback loop, it can leave, a feeling of being incomplete for some people. So, and it's really not that much work really to follow up with a phone call or an email or something, right? So I think that it is an important thing to do, and it really, for the effort involved, could just make all the difference to the overall project.
Right. You talk about the toolkit that was in 2008, and one of the things you had said that there, on page 23, that there was some disconnect, that people didn't know that there was a toolkit. So you're going to upgrade it. How are you going to make sure that that is available and that all staff who are going to facilitate any kind of public engagement know that to use that?
I think the vision is sort of to update the toolkit and then actually apply the toolkit in training sessions, because I think that would be the most effective way than me just pushing it out on the intranet and saying, hey, there's these new tools, what do you think? But actually sitting down, talking with staff, working through it, and also asking them, are these effective tools? Because from what I've seen in my best practice research, there's tons of tools out there that I could have just borrowed and, implemented here, but is it going to work? Right. That's the thing, right? So it's it's a good idea in principle, but it really needs to work for our staff. If they're not going to use it, I don't want to put it out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things I was going to ask you about the Citizens Guide to Community Engagement. So that's a piece that you're hoping will be an outcome of all of the work that you've done, something that will be available online, and for those who don't always use online, maybe at community centers. Is that what you're anticipating?
For sure, yeah. And for those materials to be available at public meetings, maybe if we do videos, the videos are playing in the background, the materials all look the same, it's all consistent. I think that's the big sort of finding in this review, is that there is a lack of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So these recommendations in this whole process is to try and bring some of that consistency.
And I think that's very important because, I think when we had our conversation, one of the things I said is I love the way this department does their public engagement, but this department really could use a lot of help. And so it'd be great to have that consistency. And on page 30, you, of course, have given us some idea of what citizen engagement may cost, and I think I really appreciate that. Of course, you've got a low and a high cost. Maybe a mid cost may have been, I don't know if it would have been possible to have something in the mid cost. Do you see that the low cost scenario is something that's very doable?
I think it's doable. I guess it just depends on sort of how far we want to go with some of these things and to the extent that we want to do some of this work. But yeah, either option is doable. Obviously, low cost would be, less cost to the city, more on my time, I guess, and that's kind of the consideration at the bottom there around staff resourcing. Like, we need to think of that larger picture. And then same with the high cost scenario. Like, we can make it work with that as well. If the funding's there. And I think looking again at best practices of other cities, we're in a really good spot in Kitchener because we have my position that exists. A lot of cities don't. Like, I went to a conference in Toronto a couple of months back and I asked that question, like, how many cities have like community engagement staff? Not many raised their hand. So it's kind of a growing thing. But then on the other hand, some cities that do have it are going like full tilt. So it really just depends on like how far we want to push things, and it really comes back to resources and capacity.
Right. And I think the other thing too that you identified in here is the trust factor, right? Mm-hmm. You can have all the other components, but if you have a public meeting, how are we going to build that trust? How are we going to? People are coming in feeling they've already made a decision, and that's a critical point, right?
It is, and it's very difficult because you can have, many positive experiences that slowly inch people to have more trust, and then one bad experience could pull that back a bit. And I've heard from residents that, some people have long memories. So when they say things like, the city doesn't value or blah, 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 that could have been from something that happened 10 years ago. Right. And so that's the damaging, thing to consider, is that when engagement isn't done properly, it does stick in people's minds. So we just want to be careful that moving forward, we do our best in all engagement activities to really just focus on building that trust and respect in the process.
Right. Like a bad dentist, right? You never forget about that bad dentist experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though you may have 20 other ones. I have comments after.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. I'm trying to ascertain the number of people that were involved. On page 5 or 7-9, you talk. It says 100 plus citizens through 2 community workshops and 11 advisory committees. Now, are those 100 the advisory committees, or are they other people?
Both.
So there's people other than that were, okay.
Yeah, in fact, actually, most of the citizens that came to our workshops weren't necessarily from advisory committees.
On page 33 of the booklet, of the formal document, it talks about 620 surveys, 180 from registered users, and 440 from unregistered. And then when you get into the details, that 440 goes up to 512. Is that correct?
Right. The 512 is of the number of people that, of the 620, 512 gave a postal code. So that's what that map data is on page 40. It just kind of gives you a sense of like where the comments came from.
512. I was trying to put the two together to try to looking at page 40,
Right.
Do I add those two together? I mean, take a look at what is, for example, Ward 5, which is primarily in that one postal code. So,
I see.
Were there 31 people from that area? Am I correct in looking at it that way? Or was there 20? I'm just trying to see what kind of coverage we got, what kind of response.
Personally, I would say probably the geographic location by postal code is going to give you the most accurate numbers.
So is it different than the geographic location? Or I thought it was, I had to add both of them up to get.
It's kind of confusing to explain. Basically, the geographic location by address is from the people that went on to Engage Kitchener and registered to have an account. So they gave an address and all that information. But I also asked a question on that same survey that said, what are the first 3 digits of your postal code for the people that didn't want to register? So there is a chance that someone did register, give their address, and then they may also have filled out that 3-digit postal code. And so that's why I think it probably would be best to look at the
Are they counted twice?
They're not counted twice in the right graphic.
So if I look at the 11 in Ward 5, are they included in the 20 under postal code N2R?
They may be, yeah.
All right. Okay, that's fine. Just one final question. Can you give me a rough idea of what this has cost, this project, up to this point? If you can't now, that's fine.
I can probably give you a rough estimate of maybe around $1,000.
Everything?
Like not counting my staff time, obviously, but like
counting brochures and.
Yeah, because we didn't do like a huge rollout kind of thing. Like we had the couple of workshops and food and coffee and then printing of this. So probably around 1,000.
Seems very late. Thank you.
And that's a good question that was asked, and the answer that you gave is very impressive, that we were able to compile this body of work within, apart from staff costs, but that minimal of a cost to our taxpayers, and the benefit that we receive from this. Obviously, this is. Sorry, I can't hear you. If you want to. Well, some of us.
Well, I can pull like exact numbers if you guys want, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like costs for food and a couple of workshops and printing materials.
You answer the question. That's fine, Josh,
yeah,
and
thanks.
I value your hard work and take full faith in what the information that you're providing, Council. A couple questions I had is. Comments, okay. If members of the committee want to ring in for comments as I ask my questions. With our new CRM software, do we have an avenue of collecting input from citizens, especially when they have a user ID? It's been verified. It has, there's more of identity to that person responding. Do we have a mechanism through that?
I'm not entirely sure, but I know that it's something that we've talked about exploring, because I think that would go a long way if a citizen could just, for example, log on to pay their bill and then Engage is right there.
Exactly.
Whereas right now we're asking people to go to a separate tool to register with Engage. They may or may not be likely to do that.
Right.
So I like that idea, and I think it's something we should explore for sure.
Can I ask other members of staff if that's something that once it was looked at, what's the limiting factor, or when can that implementation, if it's already been decided that is a go forward? Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, we are committed to that vision. That's a single sign-on that Dan Murray referenced earlier in his presentation today. It's really a technical issue, and so it's something that Forum's now part of the Digital Kitchener Work Plan. It was not identified as a priority in 2017, but all I can tell you is that work continues to progress on that, so it will happen within the 4-year term of that strategy.
Excellent, that's good to hear. The item has been moved by Councillor Fernandez. I will take comments. My apologies, Mayor Vivanovic.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to provide my comments and thank Josh for the great job that he's done on this file. I think as he's pointed out, there's a lot of cities who don't have a digital strategy in place yet, and who don't have the kinds of focus that we've put on this issue. And I think it signifies our commitment to engaging our citizens on the issues that we're dealing with as a community. I think the strategy really helps define the role that each of us play, us as elected officials, the role that staff plays, and the role that, quite frankly, the community needs to play in terms of being engaged as well. And I think the other point, and you start linking these various strategies together, is looking at how we can use various digital engagement tools, but also making sure that those are in addition to traditional methods that we've utilized in the past to better engage citizens going forward. So I'm really excited about this. Great job, and look forward to see it implemented in the months ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Yeah, I want to compliment Josh, and I know when we sat down when we had our meeting, and one of the biggest things that I had concerns about was, regardless of what the municipality does, there's always going to be some kind of form of, I don't believe what that's the outcome. I think it's predisposed, et cetera, et cetera. And regardless, even when you do your best efforts and knock on individuals' doors, they still come back and say otherwise. So I think the strategies that are going to be implemented here, or at least are going to put the best foot forward for the city to move forward. And I think that's good stuff. Thank you. Thanks.
And Councillor Fernandez.
Just one quick question. Maybe, Josh, you can't answer this, but maybe some of the other staff, maybe. Where was this on the priority list for, like, the council had identified? Does anybody remember? Was it in the top 5? Was it in the top 10? Oh, okay. For some reason, I think it was in the top 5.
In talking with Lori Major about this, I think it was in like the top 15.
Yeah, I think it was even higher.
I think it was, it might have been higher, but
yeah.
Top 15.
Okay. I just curious because the Digital Kitchener had quite a lot of input and comment, and here this is something that seems to be very near and dear to many people's heart when they talk about it, but not as many questions and not as many comments. This report is very...
Other comments coming, but we don't...
I'm just making a comment. I'm not done yet. This report, I think, is really a good reflection of what you heard and the participation you saw at the workshops, as well as your engagement with staff. And I think it's really important that this gets into the hands of our residents and our staff. I'm sure we'll get to our staff, but in the hands of our residents, because one of the key parts is when you identify the responsibilities. And citizens, and we hear it from our councillors, hear it all the time, and I'm sure that the call center hears about it all the time. But nobody's listening to me, and we never get any comments from nobody has had a public meeting about stuff, and we do, and we try many times valiantly to engage people. But if they don't come, and we build it, but they're not coming, or they don't want to participate, then we don't have full engagement. And I think one of the things that is true is that true engagement happens when people feel like they're attending something where they are heard and that they trust the process will incorporate their comments, even if they don't agree with the solutions that are there. And I like that you've included the pie charts, because that's some statistical data that many people like to see. And I think that you've also been fair in giving this some consideration to the cost. There's always a cost, and we know that. And sometimes some documents are a bit more visionary. This document, I think, is more hands-on. You've been really into the community, and you've heard a lot of things from a lot of levels of our residents and staff and council. I attended the workshop, and I heard around the table there was a lot of suspicion and a lot of suspect about, is this really going to mean anything? Is this going to really play out? And I think this document does reflect what you wanted to do and what I think we as a council wanted to hear. So I'm hoping some of those naysayers will say, yeah, I think they got it right. And if we didn't get it right, hopefully we'll hear about that too. So thanks for listening, Josh. Thanks for listening to our residents, and thanks for listening to the stakeholders that attended all those engagements. If your ears are not sore yet, I'm sure they will be. I'll be interested to see how we roll this out, especially when you talk about the toolbox and modules. Maybe we don't only need to train staff, but maybe we need to train some residents on how to participate in community engagement. So thanks. I'm happy to move this.
When you were making that comment, and the reason why I was trying to interrupt was you're saying that you're surprised not many other comments. Well, there were questions by others, but comments, you mentioned comments, and there's 3 members in queue as you were speaking. So there are other comments that are coming. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Yes, Josh, I just wanted to add my thanks as well. I can see in here that I think you've, at least in the conversations that we've had, you've covered my biggest concerns. This really has to be a tool that helps us make the right decision. Frankly, a lot of us are afraid of making the wrong decision, and every bit of information we can have helps. And the 2 biggest areas I was concerned about was that cracking that nut of getting the people that typically aren't engaged, and you've covered that well. And the other one, of course, is doing the best that we can to make sure that whether it's necessarily statistically or not, as long as this is representative as possible of the will of the group of people we're looking at, I think that's the most important thing. So I look forward to seeing how this comes back and the options in it, and I'm optimistic that it will actually help us make better decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and thank you, Josh, and your team for this. I think we as council, all of us want the best information possible from our citizens to guide our decisions. And I think this plan is going to get that information to us. It's going to get more people engaged, and it's going to get us some great statistical information. I know there's going to be training of staff. I would love, as a councillor, to receive some training on how to behave at a consultation meeting when we're trying to get this, so we actually can listen and really hear and play an important role in a meeting that's getting input from citizens. I think that's really important. I think as council that we have to be prepared to really listen to the engagement we get back, and this has to be a deciding factor on how we vote. Thank you.
Councillor Galway-Sealock.
Yeah, I quickly just wanted to say that I'm happy that seeing this move forward, and that there's not the one solution catches all. I really like that there's a number of different points, and I just think a number of different options that we can use on various engagement tools. And so I'm really encouraged by that, as well as trying to reach out to populations that typically don't participate. I think those are really key. And I just wanted to say that sometimes there doesn't need to be a lot of questions, that sometimes a document can speak for itself, and it doesn't really reflect the importance of a document if there's a lot of questions. So I think you've done a really good job, and that may be reflective of why we didn't spend as much time on this item today, but you've done a really good job through your engagement on this, but also in the way it was written. So thank you very much.
Good. I'll just quickly take an opportunity to thank you, Josh, and everyone else involved with the countless hours that goes into really dwelling in deep. And as you can see, the document is extensive enough. It's clear to see that great pains were taken to ensure that we look at every avenue possible, how to improve the way we stay in tune to the concerns and the issues of our residents. And I'm comforted and impressed that we're going to improve our methods also in a way that we speak to and ask questions of our residents when trying to get the necessary input. And that training is absolutely going to be necessary, and I think it would be beneficial, as Councillor Schneider has said, to members of council. Too often, some of us, talk too much and not ask the right questions or not listen enough. And that's a training that's going to be only benefit to ensure that our residents are heard and appreciated in the input that's received. And I think, especially this document coming today, is important because of the earlier endorsement by this committee committee in finance for the Digital Kitchener, because I see one of the same. I think Digital Kitchener is community engagement is Digital Kitchener, and the benefits that we can take through that strategy in better connecting with our residents, so that it's a two-way, seamless process. I think that's what's going to allow better connectivity to our residents, and kind of comforting and impressed that those tools are soon going to be available to us. So thank you again to staff and the hard work involved, and I will take the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Committee adjourned.